you see, and why it makes so much difference to the business of a free society, to the business that the Vision and Values Center is really concerned with. Why do you need a mom and a dad so very much in your in society? So our little boy, as I mentioned, couldn't talk. So we had to intervene. We had to do a lot of things to help him catch up to the things that didn't happen. And in the course of doing that, we came to learn more about child development than either of us ever wanted to know. And we came to see just how much we take for granted. I think that's the key thing. How much society is and has been taking for granted the work of mothers and fathers, and particularly of mothers in that first crucial year, that first crucial 18 months of life. Now, before I tell you anything more, I want to tell you my son is doing fine. Okay, our son is 24 years old. He's living on his own with another guy. He's got a job. He's doing fine. So I don't want you to freak out when I'm about to tell you some of this stuff, because it's pretty scary. We didn't know it was going to turn out, because there are a lot of scary things that can happen. If you have a child who is profoundly neglected, who's badly neglected, there are a couple of things that can happen to a child who does not have a parent or a parent figure in their life. And one of the things that can happen is what is called attachment disorder. Now, I see a few of you nodding here. That means some of you maybe know somebody or you have some experience with this. Attachment disorder, if you've really got it bad, what you see is a child who does not care what anybody else thinks of them. A child who does not connect to a parent, who does not connect to an adult, and they don't care what anybody thinks of them, says to them, or anything else. The only way you can control their behavior is to actively, physically intervene and stop them. They're going to do whatever they want. They have no conscience. They don't care whether you're upset with them. So normally, if you've got a little child and you're training the little child and they start moving around, see, babies are easy when you put them down in one place and they stay there. We didn't have that. We brought our little boy home from Romania and brought him to our home. He started rearranging the furniture. That was like, this is not normal. People don't normally rearrange the furniture on the first day of parenthood. But anyway, you put the baby in the crib, they stay there. Anyway, so what normally happens is you're connecting with the baby, and when they're up and running around, when they get to the point where they're up and running around, you tell them, now don't do that. Right? And you might gently stop them, and they get the picture they're not supposed to do that. Okay, swell. As they get a little bit older, you don't have to intervene physically. You tell them from across the room, now don't do that, and they look at you and they go, okay, Mom, And eventually you get to the point where you don't even have to say anything. You just kind of give them that eyeball, from across the room, and they're like, Mom's home, got to behave, right? And eventually, what in the normal course of conscience development, eventually what will happen is the child doesn't need you in the room at all. The child doesn't need your input. They've internalized it all. Right? They've internalized it all, and they don't even consider doing certain things. They don't even consider shoplifting. They don't even consider, gee, can I get away with this? Gee, is my mom watching? Gee, is my dad going to kill me if I do this? They're not even thinking like that because it's internalized. So that development of the conscience, which requires an adult parental figure of some kind, that development of the conscience is absolutely crucial to a free society, right? Because what do we need in a free society? We need children. Well, actually, we need adults. We need adults who can use their freedom without bothering other people too much. Isn't that really what it comes down to? We got to be able to turn people loose in a free society and have them control themselves. And if they can't control themselves, you got a problem. So that's one of the things that can happen, which is called attachment disorder, that if a child does not have a parental figure, that they can really, literally turn into a sociopath, right? Because a person without a conscience who does anything they can get away with is a person who can be very difficult to deal with. I mean, you can get them out of trouble when they're 2 or when they're 4. You can go pick them up and get them out of trouble. But when they're 14, it's a whole different scale of problem because you can't stop them. And what sometimes will happen is as the child matures and they still haven't been able to really install the conscience program, and get that really going in the child, if they're older, if they're bigger, when they get big enough to do what they want, the family gets scared of them. The family starts to get scared of them, and they're relieved if the kid gets put in jail for something that's minor, right? Because the kid's safe, the family's safe, and You know, it's extremely difficult, tragic situation, okay? But you can see that society cannot handle a lot of conscienceless people without a lot of expense and trouble and still remain free. You just can't do it. So that's one of the things that can happen without a mom, without a dad, without, you know, that's one of the very serious risk factors associated with neglect, whether it's in an orphanage, whether it's in a lot of foster care, those type of things. That's one of the risks. There's another very interesting thing that they discovered in the Romanian orphanages, and it's called, they actually, a lot of doctors went over there, tried to help. You know, everybody's freaked out over these orphanages because they're really terrible. You know, Americans are so charitable and big-hearted and everything. People zoomed over there, and the doctors discovered something that they had never exactly seen before, and they called it institutional autism. Institutional autism. And what that means is that the thought is that the children were having autistic-like symptoms, but the thought was that they were not necessarily born congenitally autistic, but rather that something developmentally had failed to happen that led to this. So I want to tell you just a little bit about how that process goes, what we believe we know about it, okay? Because obviously we don't know everything, but this is what we believe we know about it. Then when a baby is born, of course when a baby is born, their brains are not fully developed. You probably have heard that, right? That an infant's brain, if your brain was fully developed before birth, you wouldn't make it down the birth canal without killing your mother, you know, which is obviously a design defect, right? So that's not the way it's done. You're born and your brain starts to develop. Well, one very interesting fact about that is that there's a part of your brain that's called the limbic brain, and that's the part that develops after, one of the first things that develops after birth. The limbic brain controls your ability to be in relationship with other people. It's the limbic brain. It's different from the part, the cerebral cortex up here that balances checkbooks and plays checkers and things like that. It's not the cognitive part of the brain. It's the part of the brain that allows you to intuit facial expressions, intuit emotions. It's the part of the brain that lets you know, that allows you to really connect with other people. And here's what we believe happens with that. We believe that that develops right here, when you're holding the baby. When you're holding the baby, what are you normally doing when you're holding the baby? You're looking at him, right? You're looking at the baby. And the baby, when baby's born, they're looking. What are they looking for? They're looking for a face. They're looking for a face. They're looking for mom's face. They're looking for a face. So when you're looking at the baby, we're pretty sure we know this now, that the brain is actually developing. Little synapses are connecting, and there's a part of the brain that develops right there in that relationship. And it's the part of the brain that governs your ability to be in relationship. So these little guys that they found in the orphanage over there that were banging their heads and having autistic symptoms, they believe that that was because nobody held them. Nobody held them, right? And they're there by themselves trying to somehow make sense of their world without any kind of personal reference, without anybody to look at, without anybody to connect to. So that institutional autism is a very serious consequence also of lack of a mother, lack of father, right? Lack of parental help and assistance. And I want to just point out for all of us here, because Grove City College is a faith-based kind of institution. I suppose most people have some kind of faith tradition, that we have always been taught in the Christian tradition that the human person is meant for love. Isn't that what we've always been taught? The human person is meant for love. We were created by love, and we're meant for love. And here it is, looking at these little guys, that you can see it's actually written into the body that we need love, right? That without it, we don't develop properly. We literally don't develop properly. And you can see it's written right into the human structure of the human body, that the human person is meant for love. So that's, I think, quite a marvelous reality that we can in a sense, be grateful for. So, so there we were with these two kids and learning all this stuff about child development and so on. And it started to become real to me that my profession, the economics profession, had a real problem. We were calling ourselves a social science, telling ourselves we're the queen of the social sciences, we know everything, and those sociologists don't know anything, and blah, blah, blah. You know, we're very, economists, I don't know if you know any economists. We have a tendency to be full of ourselves, you know. But it occurred to me that we had this big problem. We simply assumed adults. Right? We have no idea where adults come from. Right? We just assume that somehow there are adults. And here I am with a child at risk for attachment disorder, a child with all kinds of developmental problems, and I'm going, wait a second, you cannot assume that people get from this condition to an adult condition. You cannot assume that. You are assuming way too much here, right? That something's got to happen. And we were taking all of that stuff for granted, right? That 2-year-olds do not respect property rights. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, but they don't. So something's got to happen. And so the neglect of the family sector, it became clear to me that this is a huge problem. And in that period of time, when I was fantasizing that I was going to somehow raise a child without ever staying home from work a day, you know, the kind of ethos in the society was that anything adults decide to do is going to be okay. That kids are somehow so adaptable and so malleable and so resilient that it'll be just fine no matter what we do. And it became real to me that that's just not true. And so in doing the book, the research for the book Love and Economics, which we mentioned, I started looking into a whole variety of different, of the research, of the sociological research about family forms and family structure. And it just became clear that it's not true that we get to do anything we want. And somehow there's some invisible hand that's going to make it all work. You know, that simply isn't the case. So what I'd like to do now is to go through those 3 areas that I mentioned at the beginning as to exactly how it is that the family impacts citizenship, or that that the health of the family and the structure of the family has something to do with the larger project of the free society.